Welcome to Kaiser Watch with John Kaiser. I'm your host, Jim Goddard. John, what's coming up on the show today?
Well, today, Jim, we're going to talk about why fantasy sports should be looked at by the junior resource sector as a way to help them make investing in exploration juniors more entertaining and bring the younger audiences that are currently missing into the fold. I'm going to use Endurance Gold as an example. They put out a good press release, and there was almost no market reaction. And I think I know what the solution to that is. I also want to mention that we are now available, open for 2025 KRO traditional membership that will be grandfathered at $450 US per year. Our bottom fish list is now growing, and anybody who wants to join now will be a member until the end of 2025 with grandfathering rights to continue at the old $450 per year rate, even though by April 1st I will have started a new $200 per month rate for any newcomers after that.
Why do you think the resource juniors should take a look at fantasy sports gambling?
You know, the Canadian resource junior ecosystem is dying despite the record high gold prices for a number of reasons which I belabored multiple times in the past year. But one of the reasons that people don't really talk about is that owning a resource junior is no longer as entertaining as it used to be. I mean, I started in this sector in 1978 and the 80s and 90s and even into the 2000s. Investing in these exploration juniors and during the super cycle when it was all about existing deposits being dragged into the money, it was fun. It was entertaining. You had the prospect of making a whole bunch of money. Now you don't really have that prospect anymore, but you still have the potential to be entertained. But we are not really being entertained by the companies anymore. And this is something that I think should be addressed. And, you know, I don't do fantasy sports myself, but I've read about it. And what it is it's this process where you get a group of people, they form a league, and this is usually done within these platforms. And then all these individuals get to draft real players from the real sports league, football, whatever, and that becomes their team. And they earn points during the season from how those individuals play. And they can use those points to get rid of injured players or ones that are not trending well. And it's not treated as betting or gambling under the formal definition because there is skill involved. In order to potentially win the pot at the end of the day, you need to end up with the most points, which means you need to study the statistics of the football league, all the players and all that. So this becomes a very much a thinking game, and you have to monitor it in real time. What just happened? What's trending? What psychological things are going on? What are going to affect it? And you manage the composition of your team and hopefully end up with the most points at the end of the season. But it also takes place within a social media forum where all the people there are talking about it. They're mocking each other's picks. They're guessing on, well, why are you trading this person? And what do you hope to get out of that? So even at the end of the season, and of course you do not influence the results of the in the real world football league at all, even if you have lost your initial bet and not won the prize, you at least look back on this whole experience as having been very entertaining and fulfilling. And this needs to happen with the resource junior sector. The companies need to present their stories in much more articulate and graphical form than they are accustomed to. Now, when we had the great Bre-X betrayal, this monster 80 million ounce fabricated deposit demolished the credibility of the Canadian resource junior system, they introduced a disclosure reform called NI 43-101, and that has gone a long way to eliminate the fabrication of fraudulent results. It has not eliminated the possibility for parallel universes made possible by the extensive social media innovations of the past couple decades for fraudulent claims to be pumped that our company doesn't even know anything about. But companies that have serious technical teams trying to deliver real exploration results, they're not really going to be the sort of thing that these types of frauds happen. The bigger problem that has come as a result of 43101 is that it has instilled a certain degree of timidity. There is such a regulatory hostility towards any sort of arm waving, extrapolating, what do these little chicken scratches on this diagram potentially mean, that what a lot of companies end up doing is producing geological word salads with accompanying tables of data that leaves the audience out there public cold. And we now have this problem that the boomer generation, which was very much interested in this sector, well, they are retiring, they are developing other priorities, and the younger generations, not only, they may have peripherally watched what was going on during that China super cycle of the 2000s, but not really participated. And if they did trouble to participate in the past 12, 14 years, well, they've quickly learned that this is a place where you simply just lose your money. And nowadays, you can't even get your hopes up anymore. So they are not interested. They play the cannabis bubble. They play momentum games elsewhere. And they can have their entertainment in fantasy sports. So bringing that audience back, you need to first have an education gateway so that they know how to think about this, about how geotalk and all that works. And you need to have the companies be more forthcoming in helping the public understand what the hell the word salad that shows up in Stockwatch along with those tables actually means. Now, about 6-7 years ago, I did create something called a Share Collective, which a group of Australians sank $2 million into. Unfortunately, they only understood the outcome visualization aspect of it and designed a wonderful system for user inputs, designing a deposit and making choices and figuring out what it would be worth if it existed. What they did not understand was that this was supposed to be a spectator sport with feedback mechanisms where everybody could be people could be doing this stuff, doing the heavy lifting and sharing their visualizations into public space, but the majority would be just sitting there watching it, picking and choosing, and having a conversation as these results, and this is the curse of the resource junior sector, as results come in these event blocks, these stages of information. Every 2-3 months come some results. There's nothing in between. And we now have the structural problem that I've talked about endlessly, where the algos, the bots run by Canada's financial establishment, they sit there, monitor the entire system, detect a news release, see incoming buying, and instantly they're just automatically selling non-existent paper into the buying. And the buying, because there is no real story that's being propagated, pushed out there, encouraging people to understand, these results, they're not like off the scale, but they are incrementally improving the story, making it better, bringing more and more buying in. No, there's a small group of people who get it. They go in there and buy it, and they immediately get hammered by this intraday short selling. And then by the end of the day, it's all collapsed back. The algos lean into the order book. The stock ends up back where it started, sometimes even lower. The capital's stripped out, and the companies are stuck in this dilution treadmill. And any of these younger generations looking at this and say, the resource junior sector is a death trap. This is why the ecosystem's dying. And the Canadian establishment doesn't care because they have bigger fish to fry, looting the accounts of all the boomers that are retiring. So I've come up with this idea of how do you get the companies to tell the story much better. And I'm going to use Endurance Gold as an example later on, but structurally, here's what should happen when you publish an important news release. First of all, the news release should be available on your website, not just as an HTML page, which usually doesn't print properly, but include a link to the PDF which you had to have created and filed on CEDAR the moment you publish that news release. And that will include that all the graphics and tables associated with your press release will print properly. And people like myself who are old school specialists, we like to print out these multi-page news releases, get out our highlighters and pens and actually highlight and circle stuff that we think are important so that when we do call management, we've got it all in front of us. So that's a very simple thing to do. And include key graphics like drill plans and sections and tables, but you don't have to include all of them because there's something else companies can do. They can attach a technical presentation to the news release. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, it shouldn't be more than 10, 12 pages. The first 2 pages are the cover and the mandatory disclaimer. The last 2 pages are sort of the final page with contact information. The second last one is all who are the people, what's the structure, what's the financial situation. And the 6 to 8 pages in between are about the project that your press release is about. And the first page should be some sort of map that shows what the property outline and highlights where it is that you've been doing your work, along with some sort of inset map showing where on planet Earth this property is located. And then you get into the guts of your press release, and that is drill plans, long sections, cross sections, all with the latest dots and numbers and assays added to it, followed by a table of all the results so far produced for the season, and then followed by a timeline type slide where you sort of show what has been done so far, what's happening over the next 6, 12 months, what are the milestones that are going to be happening. And all this data, the company has plenty of time to assemble while they are waiting for the assays to dribble in over the internet. So the word salad that goes into the news release is actually the last thing that they write. They assemble all these other graphics and that because that's what they're actually talking to. And unfortunately, in all these media systems like Stockwatch, it's just the words and tables that get communicated. So everybody's just got this eye-glazing stuff to look at and can't make heads or tails of it. But they can have all these other graphics ready. The news releases used to be released after the market close, but now they release them in the morning because until 9:30 the people in Toronto have nothing to do, so they presumably have plenty of time to read the news release and digest what it means. So the company doesn't release it until the morning, so it has to have it ready the day before, and it can have this technical presentation also on the website ready to go. Now, that's fine and great. That's wonderful for people like me. I get it. I look at the stuff. I have a reasonable ability to decode the word salad and can make up a conclusion as to whether it's good news or bad news. But what the companies should also be doing to help out is that very afternoon, after they finish their word salad and tables, they load that presentation onto Zoom, get it started, and a CEO will sit there and he'll go through it, perhaps with an associate, and simply walk through the highlights of the press release using their mouse or whatever tool they have to draw circles on that to visually show the audience, here's what's important in today's results, here's what sucks, and don't worry about pointing out stuff that disappointed. Contrary to what one might believe, shareholders actually like to hear, yeah, this was bad. And so long as this doesn't mean that the entire project is dead, they say, good, okay, you're being honest with us. Now let's go back to this other stuff. And after you've done this, and this is a simple 5 to 10 minute presentation, you post it on your YouTube channel and release it the next day. And that sets you up for people like me. They can watch it and be reminded of what was the story when I last looked at it a month or two ago, what has changed, and I can also use it to call up management if I'm the type of person that management will speak to and walk through it with them and offer alternative interpretations, or ask questions that what the CEO or the VP of Exploration may have said about that, to help me understand and write secondary content about that I can then publish into whatever social media sphere that I have. So I think this sort of innovation, and it's interesting, Eric Friedland's Peregrine Diamonds always published these types of at least technical presentations, and then they would sometimes even do an actual live presentation which they would record, and Robert Boyd was a director of it. So this is not like something brand new, but it is something that I think these companies should embrace, because the audience out there wants to understand that this is a story like a football season that's going to take time to unfold, that will have steps along the way, that will have deviations and things that do not go right, sometimes go fantastic right, and they want to have the adrenaline highs when things start to go right. They want to deal with the reversals of the lows when things are not going right. They want to turn this into a entertainment experience that extends over time. If the resource junior sector wants to attract new audience, it has to make itself accessible in this manner.
How good a job does Endurance Gold do spinning its Reliance story?
Endurance Gold Corp is a really good example of a legitimate resource junior that does a fabulous job executing solid technical work and always presenting its results with coherent graphics and tables that all make sense. And you go to their website and look at their corporate presentations, and you don't even need to look at the rest of the website. The corporate presentations are self-contained. Everything is there. It's like Robert Boyd, Have Suitcase, Will Travel, can go anywhere in the world with that presentation, and almost the entire story is embedded in that presentation. And on November 19th, they reported the assays for the next 5 holes on the Reliance project, which is located in southwestern British Columbia. And of that, there were 2 holes that were the highlights, number 93 and 103. It's in the Crown Crab. On October 23rd, they had tagged these as pending holes with visible gold. And at the time, I had talked with Robert Boyd and discovered, well, doesn't mean that this is like with your hand lens looking close on a whole meter of core, you can find a tiny speck. This was gold you could see from like as much as 2 meters away. Wow, this really stood out. And the assays confirmed, yes, this is really good gold. The kind that would normally get Eric Sprott all very excited about it, high grade, and it's in an epizonal orogenic system, which can go very deep, and there can be an awful lot of it. And so these assays, they came out, they were immediately significant. They were far enough apart that you say, wow, of these, the other 3 5 holes, they did hit mineralization, but it was low grade, 1 to 2 gram per ton over short intervals. But the fact that these 2 in this undrilled area tagged such high-grade intervals, that's statistically quite interesting. 1, okay, got lucky. 2, you have to be super lucky to get that. So this is a very significant result. Well, what was the market reaction? Well, the market reaction, there was a little bit of trading, but by noon, like it had stalled at 81,000 shares or so. And that was despite the fact that Robert Sin, through his Goldfinger, and that's an outfit that gets paid by Endurance Gold to like the company. He had mentioned the results, and he'd actually done a decent job of putting the plan and the on the screen and circling and showing, here's what I like, this is what we're still hoping for. So he did a pretty good job on that. But that was out right on the open. That made no difference. Then there's another company called Atrium Research, and this is a kind of a new style of so-called independent research, which offers itself as an alternative to brokerage-style research, which tends to be driven by expectations of future investment banking fees, which is the reason why the Canadian brokerage sector does not really cover the resource junior sector anymore. The only problem is that groups like Atrium, when they're paid by the company, they're bound by the very same 43101 rules that restrict what Robert Boyd can say in his word salad. It has to be reasonably opaque and meaningless to not get people excited. So the Atrium research report, which looked exactly like one from one of the established brokerage firms, basically retossed the word salad in slightly different order, and reading it, it was absolutely no extra insight that I could glean from reading it. So as far as I was concerned, these types of paid services, and they're on a 12-month contract where they get paid for 12 months by Endurance Gold to publish this research, which is available unrestricted on their website. It really does nothing to enhance the storytelling part. And the companies don't really want to embed all this story type of stuff that I was describing earlier in the press release. It ends up becoming an even bigger word salad. So what the company failed at was to really convince new audiences to like the stock. And of course, I went and looked at them. By the time several hours later, I had taken the graphics, dropped them into my PowerPoint, annotated them, circled everything, and then provided a written description in my Slack forum to my KRO members. What this all mean? Well, by now they know I like this story. They like it. It's obvious, but they've seen it flatline all year, and they saw nothing really happen in the market. So they didn't bother buying anything. Very little buying happened in the next couple of days, and this is the problem. The story isn't being told, and I think if Robert Boyd had a presentation, a technical presentation of the style that Peregrine Diamonds used to do, ready, and then done his own brief. It doesn't have to have anything scintillating. It just has to be showing people visually, this is important, this is not important, this is what's happening here, just so that it reminds people like me, what was the story? Other ones that are on the sidelines can see what the story is. And when you get something like this going, if there's good news, there'll be a bump when the stock opens up. The algos will immediately sell into it. That's usually the end of the story. But if there are people on the sidelines, they won't have been watching when the open happened, but they will hear about this, they'll see this video, and they'll look at it and say, oh, this is actually good. So a second wave of buying from people who are already primed but not paying attention comes in and starts to absorb the algos as they lean into the bid side. And all of a sudden, the algos are wondering, what the hell is going on here? And then when the YouTube video gets blasted by people like myself and others into broader circles, and people see this and say, oh, and then they look at the tape. I mean, the tape, everybody looks at the tape. If the tape's doing nothing or trending down, no matter what the press release says, it must be bad. But if they see it trending up, and then they see what the story's about, and that is actually a positive story, they will buy more. And by the end of the day, the stock may have traded a bunch of shares and will have closed at a higher level, and the algos, hoping to cover their shorts at the end of the day, will have had to do it at a loss. And something like this is needed to teach them respect. Now, in terms of the way what I was looking for in the press release, which I couldn't really find there, I did have a chance to talk briefly with Robert Boyd for 10 minutes. And basically, it was just to confirm that I was reading the graphics and the word salad correctly. And that was pretty much confirmed, and got a little bit of the timeline from him before he had to go to conference calls with very important people who out there, obviously, whatever it is that they concluded from the presentation and conference call, didn't rush in to buy the stock, and it's still stuck at 13, 14 cents. So I've already mentioned the the two holes in the crown gap. This is very important. The crown gap clearly is very fertile. It was never drilled before because at surface the values in the soils are not very good. But we have seen parts of this, 300-400 meter wide Royal Treasure Shear Corridor have fantastic values and not fantastic values. It stretches for at least 1,500 meters, and it's highly altered. It's enriched with gold. It follows these peculiar structures. This is an incredible system. They hit gold mineralization in 75% or so of all the holes that they drilled, but it gets no respect for the market. So, okay, got no respect for these two great results. Follow-up drilling next year in this crown gap area of about 300 meters. That should deliver lots of interesting results, but the market wants to know what's still coming. And this is a key part. One of the things that Endurance Gold does not do a good job at is map out how the future is going to unfold. And that's sort of natural conservatism. Don't want to be forward-looking, want to be just backward-looking, look at everything that we've accomplished. But when the market doesn't care about everything that you have accomplished, you need to start looking forward and pointing out what's going on. So my questions were, well, this is not all the assays. You're up to 108. How many more are you going to drill? It's supposed to be a 10,000 meter program. And what are these other holes all about? Well, they've got hole 102, which is potentially important because it fills a gap beneath the area where they've got 6 holes, shallow holes with core drilling. These are sort of 95, 97, 98, 100, 101, 104. These are twinning and filling in a bunch of RC holes that they drilled early on, where they want to do a resource estimate for the shallow portion of this system. Again, there's no mention in the press release of this. We've talked about it, that this is a possibility. This should be part of the technical presentation and what's coming up. We're looking at potentially doing a maiden resource estimate after 4 years of drilling 80 plus holes into this system to show at least what we've accomplished with the shallow part. It doesn't matter if it isn't a million ounces. This kind of system can go down a kilometer. So the shallow portion is just part of it. If it's disappointing, it doesn't matter. It's what's deeper that matters. But something like that could happen in the second quarter of next year. So this is a milestone to look forward to. I mean, I've talked about it myself, but it's not part of the general expectation of what the future holds. The general expectation is, yes, our stock will go to 10 cents in tax loss selling at the end of the year. Then we might get lucky and have our biggest shareholders give us another pity financing at a premium to market to do another season. That's not really what the market wants to see. It wants to see that things are going to get better next year, especially given that we've got a very high gold price, higher than it has historically been. Now, there's a couple of holes, 105, 107. They are into the crown gap, extending just to the northeast of the Eagle Zone where they're doing all the shallow drilling. These holes look boring, but they're potentially significant because even though at surface it doesn't look very good in the crown gap, go a little deeper, and maybe there's all kinds of stuff. So this could be low-hanging fruit to connect the Imperial Zone and the Eagle Zone with shallow drilling early next year. So hole 105 and 7 are actually quite important. In terms of the most important hole yet to come, that has to be 106. This is a deep hole drilled under hole 86, which had a decent, excellent interval. This is the deepest hole. I think it doubles the vertical depth of the system. And it's like, there are no, and what I mean doubles, it's like everything else is 50% shallower. And with their new way of presenting their long section, you can now sort of see on their meter gray dots, this is some sort of chute lens that possibly goes quite deep here. Now, being conservative, Endurance Gold is reluctant to give any visuals. They did give us the VG on the holes 93 and 103 that's delivered, but that can be unusual. We have had 15 gram per ton holes with no VG whatsoever. So hole number 6 is really important because one of the things this market has been waiting for is to see, well, what happens as you go deeper? Does this system persist, or is there some awful thrust fault or whatever that displaces everything so that everything stops? There's unaltered tombstone rock as you chase this deeper. We want to know that this altered corridor keeps plunging in this inferred direction. Now the last hole is number 108, and it's at the base of the hill near Carpenter Lake. It's right by the core shed. And he didn't say much about it, and I asked, is this the last hole of the season? And Robert said, well, it potentially is. We were chased off the mountain by snowstorm that was much earlier than expected. When there's snow up there, those mountain roads get very treacherous, and so they moved the drill down there. This is basically a scout hole. You can see a couple of yellow dots on the plan showing that there were some holes drilled, but those were shallow RC holes that apparently never penetrated fresh rock, so they don't really know what's going on down there. So hole number 108, there's no expectation that it will have anything. The company's not signaling whether it hits structure or not, but it is basically a geology hole to find out what happens to this corridor as it gets closer to Carpenter Lake. And since it's in their core shed, if they do find out something interesting about what the structure's doing down there, they could be there much earlier than April when they have historically returned to this project. So I think I've tried to sort of outline a whole series of expectations that are still pending. And yes, I've gone to the trouble to figure this out, and now I'm doing it on the free Kaiser Watch thing to make available. But I'm not as articulate as Robert could be going through the presentation, showing all this stuff, because he has the deep knowledge. And I'm not even a geologist. I'm an interpreter of the geology that other people put into word salads. So people like Robert Boyd, highly technical people, they have to do these types of presentations which make it easier for people, for audiences to visually understand what's going on, absorb the story, become engaged in it, start their own speculations about what's going on here or there, and become part of this exploration process. This, I think, is critical to getting audiences back. And when people are engaged and understand the story and the results start to support it, they become your viral marketing agencies. And then spending money on the Atrians and the Robertsons, then that starts to pay off because they are all re-echo chambers of a story that's blossoming organically. Right now we're in a dead zone where you spend money on any of these redistributors of exploration results. Nothing happens because there just isn't an audience willing to step up and play the game.
John, thank you so much for the update.
You're welcome, Jim.
I'm Jim Goddard. Comments made on Kaiser Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as a recommendation to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at kaiserresearch.com.